Good morning. Figured I'd take it outside again today. Beautiful morning. Today is day 22, or yesterday was, that I completed my no bread habit. How's everybody else doing? So Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo was an author back in the 1800s, and he was getting some pressure from his publicist. He had promised them a book, and as part of that promise, and as authors and creative types are known to, decided to throw some parties and go explore some other things, have some good times, and bit by bit, his deadline was approaching and he had nothing to show for it. The publicist was getting a little bit frustrated and threatened Victor that if he didn't do something soon, he would, get in trouble, maybe lose his book deal. And so Victor looked at his assistant and said, dude, we've got to do something. He might not have said dude, it was the 1800s, but we've got to do something. So he took all of his clothes except just his bathrobe, and he put them into a large crate, a box, and locked it and gave it to his assistant and told his assistant to take it away, and that he wasn't allowed to have it back until after he finished the book. And so over the next 5 to 6 months, he poured in and he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Published in 1831, and he actually published it 2 weeks before deadline, crazy enough. So that is what we call a commitment device. It's also known as a Ulysses Pact. And, I've got really two thoughts on that story. The first one being, even 200 years ago, bosses and publicists would get on people about deadlines. It's interesting to think about. You think about the early 1800s and you think horse-drawn carriages and buggies and stuff. You don't necessarily think about commitments and deadlines, right? Like in this fast-paced world we live in today. The second piece that I realized, though, is that's also a perfect story illustrated in Atomic Habits by James Clear regarding the third law of inversion for the behavior, and that is make it difficult. So the first one, Q. What's next? It's the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward, right? So make it easy is usually that third piece. Here, we're making it more difficult. So make it more difficult. The reason it's also called a Ulysses Pact is because Ulysses, in the novel, tied himself, or had his sailors tie himself to the ship's mast in order to avoid the sirens. He knew while his mind was clear that he might get tempted and lead to disaster in the story. So he had his sailors tie him to the ship's mast so that way when the temptation arose, he could not go down that bad behavior. Well, that's what this commitment device is. Create a system in your life that will help you to avoid the temptation that leads you towards the bad habit, that bad behavior. So athletes have been known to do something like this for years, where they will pre-make all their food portions, especially bodybuilders, right? On Sunday, they'll make it all, they'll portion it all, and that's what they take for lunches, and that's what they eat for dinners, and that's what they eat for breakfast, and so they've got everything proportioned, and they have nothing else to eat. Like, that's what they've got available. So they must eat what's already made. Also, people trying to lose weight will leave their money and their credit cards at home when they go out, so they can't get tempted to buy anything at fast food or out at restaurants. They must eat what is available, what they already have, because they've left all their other money at home. What else could you do in order to create a commitment device in your life in regards to forming new habits or getting rid of the bad ones? How can you schedule it in and dial it in such a way that you don't have any other options available? Remember that key is to change the task so that way you have to work harder to do the bad habit than you do to do the good. So if you could set something up in such a way that it's actually harder to do what's wrong than to do what's right, you're going to go the easier path. As we talked about before, human conditioning says we will go the path of least resistance. So if you can create it that the path of least resistance is the good, then that really helps to go away from the bad. A little bit more on this tomorrow. One other piece that I would have to add today is, like, as you look at your businesses, as you look at some of those big commitments you've made in life, one thing that I did to really dial in and make sure that becoming a coach was something that I was serious about is I actually paid a year in advance for the coaching call line that I use in order to talk to my clients each week. I looked at the sum of money, and it wasn't much savings, right? Like, it was only $30 or $40 that I would save by paying a year in advance. But just paying that year in advance to me was, this is a commitment. I'm making sure that I am dialing in and going to be doing this for a year. It forces me to also schedule calls that I have, not just with clients, but for certain prospecting. And it forces me to have calls in regular meetings with people that have worked with me and that are contracted with me to do services. So all of those are scheduled. The conference call line calls me as it happens. Even if I push it, it's going to call me. And so it kind of forces me into that schedule, make sure that I hold to my commitments and they hold to theirs, which is great. What else, again, can you do? People that are looking to exercise might sign up for a yoga class. If they've already paid for the class in advance, they're not going to back out of it. You pay for a trainer at the gym, right? All those types of things are things that you can do. Again, list in the comments, what else can you do? And we'll talk some more tomorrow. Thanks again. Have a great one.